We're live.
Hello, I'm Margaret.
Hi, I'm Brandon. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. Margaret and I are both licensed therapists, but this is not therapy for very, very, very many reasons. This is just an open conversation. We're talking with one another, and we're doing our best to take into account who you are, our guesses of what you're interested in, and how we're impacting you, what you're hearing us say. For those of you who are willing and able to participate in the chat, we appreciate that because it gives us a lot more information on which to base those guesses about who you are and what you're interested in and how we're impacting you. We're going to start off by just talking about whatever we're talking about, but don't hold back or hesitate or worry about taking us off track or, waiting for an opening. Just, it's like any conversation, imagine that the two of us and you are sitting around a table chatting. You jump in whenever, however, and say whatever you'd like. We work with a private therapy practice called Effective Artistry. Our offices are located in Northbrook, Illinois. We do individual, couples, family, and group therapy with individuals in the state of Illinois and Wisconsin. We also work with a few executive functioning coaches who can work with people all over the world via the internet. We will do our best to read out comments as they come in because we're streaming on 3 different platforms and you only see the chat from the platform you're watching us through. So we like to try and keep everyone on the same page by reading it out. Is there anything else I'm missing?
I think you got it all.
Okay. I'm going to change the
Can we have
Zoom.
cake while we chat? Of course you can.
I mean, cake makes most chats better most of the time, so it's great. We're not having cake. Don't even ask, Margaret.
I'm upset.
I'm kidding. Yeah. What's on your mind? How are you doing?
I am all over the place, I guess, today. There's been a lot of ups and downs, but I think I said this last time too, even when I get on the stream or do something related to work, it helps me get out of my head, so that is good. But also just really tired today and drained. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm also a little tired. I didn't sleep super well last night and have some stressful things going on, but nothing that's like a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
First world problems kinds of things. And that doesn't mean that they don't matter, but they're less likely to be of relevance or interest to other people.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's something that I like that seems worth clarifying to me is because people will do this thing that sounds like I just did it kind of too. I'm trying to do it differently, but it sounds the same, which is like, oh, the problem or the things that I'm stressed about or feeling sad about or whatever are not worth feeling stressed or sad about. When what we really mean when we're saying that something's like a first world problem or whatever is that like other people would likely not be as stressed or whatever about it as I am, which is a fine and fair thing to say. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth you stressing about. Different people are different and everyone responds to different things in different ways.
If I remember this correctly, I feel like with the first world problem thing, like when you don't have like the big serious problems going on, those, because it's still a problem in itself, it's still hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Of course. I mean, what I'm about to say I don't think is literally true, but I phrase it this way to try and get the point across. I'll tell people that like humans have a minimum level of stress, right? Like you have to stress about things to X extent. So as things in your life get better, the stress comes down until it hits a certain point, at which point, even as things in your life get better, the stress level doesn't come down. It just applies to things that are better than you used to be stressing about.
Right. I want to read the comment. The pain is my treasure, at least in the first world. The rest of the world dreams of having my problems as their treasures.
Honestly, there's a lot of truth to that, and there's different ways to phrase it. Some are more attention grabbing than others, but we talk about this sometimes amongst ourselves and also with clients that like, this thing we've been talking about, I think a lot recently of metacognition, paying attention to the thing, like you just said, getting out of my head, right? When we're in our head, we're paying attention to our thoughts and feelings, our conscious experience. And when you're like running from a hungry bear, you're not paying attention to your thoughts and feelings because that's not the most important thing right now. And so there's a way of talking about it. Like, this is one of the more attention grabbing ways to say it, that like to be depressed requires privilege,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you got to be careful about like making sure how we're using the words, because we don't mean, what we're saying there is like to be able to identify yourself as being depressed, to be aware of your feelings of being depressed requires a level of privilege. It's not to say that a person who is going through like deprivation and starvation, like that they're fine and they're not depressed or whatever. It's to say that that's not what they are able to focus on. They don't have the opportunity to even notice that stuff in the same way.
I've been thinking about that actually, but with more of like the anxiety part for me, and being like, so weird to have a positive spin on it, but kind of just, it is a privilege, I guess, to be able to notice those things and be able to, I don't know, I guess, feel those things. I don't know, I'm having trouble with the wording.
Just helps to measure my problems against my joys and even opportunities. Sure, yeah. I've used this metaphor a bunch. I'm sure I've done it on the stream more than once, and I know you know it, this mansion metaphor of like, imagine you inherit this giant mansion that you're not even able to like sell or whatever. You move into it, and it's got like 60 rooms and whatever, and you don't have all of it, like you just inherited it. You don't have the resources to be able to like take care of it all. So you just kind of identify like, well, this is the room I'll use as my bedroom. Here's the kitchen, here's the bed, like the 3, 4, 5 rooms that you're going to use, and you just stay to those and you leave the rest of it for other things. And then later in your life, as things get better, you make more money, your resources free up, and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to open up another one of these rooms and turn it into like an art studio. When you go and open that door, you see the damage that's been done to it while you weren't paying attention to it for the past 10 years or 20 years, however many years, right? So that experience of opening the door makes things worse for you in terms of how you feel.
Right.
Like you were, oh, things are going better. Great, this is awesome. And then you open that door and it's like, oh my God. Like, and not only is it like this leaking and there's all kinds of crap and there's stuff, whatever. It's not just, I'm going to have to do all this stuff to fix this room. It also reminds you that like, oh man, there's like 50 other rooms that I haven't been paying attention to that are probably like, I didn't think about them and didn't realize how bad it was. So this is one of the reasons that it's really important to help people understand that like the way that you feel and the way that you think, those things matter. They are important. They are different from what reality is. And that's not like a knock. That's not to say that because your thoughts aren't real, they don't matter. Because your feelings aren't real, they don't matter. They do. And they impact you, and they impact how you behave. And you impact what is real by how you go through the world. But there's so many things that as things improve, as reality is what's happening gets better, you'll feel worse.
Right. So I was going to ask, like, so with going towards with the mansion metaphor, then, like, do you believe that over time, because I'm opening a lot of doors in my mansion recently, and it is a lot. It is overwhelming.
Sometimes people open too many doors too fast.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, like, how, like, do you think that over time, opening those doors, like, even though you kind of know it's going to get worse before it gets better, that there's a way to not have those negative feelings be so heavy when you're opening all of these doors?
Well, I don't know about not be so heavy, but there's a way to make it. So there's what we often talk about as second order problems, which is a problem that arises in response to the response you had to something, right? So like something happens and now I'm sad.
Yeah.
That's a first order thing. And now I notice that I'm sad and I'm like, oh no, I'm sad again. And that's a second order. I'm now sad about the fact that I got sad.
Okay.
So in terms of what you're asking about, when you open the door, it's going to be unpleasant and stressful because you are now aware of work that needs to be done.
Right.
And it's not like I can just change my mindset kind of thing. It is literally we're using a metaphor here, but it is literally you are now aware of things that already were issues, but you weren't paying attention to them before. And paying attention to them allows you the opportunity, doesn't guarantee, but allows you the opportunity to do the things that makes it get better.
Right.
You're feeling stressed or bad or whatever because it's not how you want it to be, and you didn't realize that it wasn't how you wanted it to be. But now you have the opportunity to make it be the way you want it to be. But if you respond to that by being like, oh, things in my life are better. Why am I more stressed? What's wrong with me? That's a second order thing. And now that makes it a worse problem.
Okay.
Now you're thinking I should be able to like improve things and open up new rooms in the metaphor without getting stressed about what I need to do about it.
Yeah.
And no, that's what I was talking about.
I almost miss my ignorance sometimes when I talk about this. I'm like, man, that was nice to be able to just not realize all these things.
There is a reason that there's that saying, ignorance is bliss.
That makes the smallness of my space seem more of a blessing, but we know I still have big feelings.
Sure. Yeah, here's a way that people are generally more aware of this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mhm.
I'm not entirely sure why that one like caught on in the public consciousness so much, but it's useful.
I have a thought real quick.
Yeah.
I just know that when I was talking to people in my cohort, I think the reaching self-actualization, like this, I don't know, it seemed like almost like how do I say it? Like such a powerful thing to reach. Like, I don't think any of the other things that they really think about is just the big top one, self-actualization. They're like, yeah, I want to get to that.
That's funny. Well, now I'm concerned that I might be misremembering, but I believe that the top is actually transcendence and people just don't talk about that one. And
That could be.
self-actualization is the second to the top.
I'm looking at this real quick.
Again, I haven't looked at it in many, many years, so it's possible I'm getting this wrong, but I believe transcendence is the top, and transcendence is when you are now at a point where you're helping other people self-actualize, or you're helping other people actualize.
It says that's the last one. This is the highest level, representing the desire to become the best version.
That's interesting. I want to.
Maybe your version of hierarchy of needs has transcendence, but
I really want to look into this now because so Maslow was famously religious. That's not always. Yeah, transcendence is a stage beyond self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It just gets, like I said, left off.
oh, okay.
He added it later,
Oh, okay.
right? Before his death, he added.
Then I wonder why they don't teach that or add
Because he
that.
added it later,
Hmm.
and that's what part of what I was saying is that he's famously very spiritual. Not to beat a dead horse, but I've always believed that the highest level is chocolate cake. Sure.
I agree.
And I think that's generally not usually like highly thought of in scientific circles.
Mhm.
Not to say that science and religion are counterproductive, or like just to say that like if there's a major influential scientific thinker, we often still talk about and think about like their contributions to
Mhm.
science and leave aside the other stuff that we don't so much agree with or whatever, you know.
Can you remind me? I'm sorry, I got lost in the sauce. What's the difference between self-actualization and transcendence?
Well, I want to look it up again
Oh.
now, but my understanding is that transcendence is when you then begin helping other people to become actualized, fully
Oh.
actualized.
Okay.
I think that's an important addition. I think that's why but
Mhm.
I'd have to look more into it. But that would be my assumption about why he thought of it later is because there is in the human experience, like there is things beyond the self, and everything
Mhm.
in that hierarchy is all self-related stuff.
Right.
Anyway, the point of the hierarchy of needs is like we talk about it as like it's better to get to the higher stuff,
Mhm.
which it is. You know, the base level is like safety and security.
Yeah.
Your safety and survival or whatever. You know, like you need food to eat and water to drink and shelter from the elements.
Mhm.
And then there's belonging, and then whatever the third one is, we just pulled it up.
I feel like I should know this. So physiological needs is the first one: food, water, rest. Then it's
Then
safety,
safety and security.
Then belonging. and then esteem.
Self-esteem, and then self-actualization.
Maslow's hierarchy makes more sense now. Transcendence above self-actualization. It sounds like Buddha's journey. It does.
That I like to point out how similar like different people, different schools of thought, whatever, all through history and different cultures once a person starts paying attention to like the fact that I'm a thinking conscious thing, like what is that? What's going on there? There are like similar pathways that everybody goes through, different specifics, but like there's a lot of similar problems that come up and need to be addressed. You know, one of those early ones is like, how do I know anything is real?
Yeah.
And different ways have different ways of addressing that. But
how do we get to the hierarchy of needs?
because what we're talking about is like getting, stressed out about things, even though things are better.
Oh, okay.
So our culture is very focused on like improvement and self-improvement, especially. And so we talk about the hierarchy of needs as like, it's better to be worried about self-esteem than to be worried about safety and security, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple things that go along with that is safety and security is more vital than self-esteem.
Yeah.
So if that is not addressed, you can't move on to the next thing.
Right.
You have to address physiological and then security.
I know you're saying you have to, but excuse me. Like that makes sense, sure, but I feel like not everyone does that.
Oh yeah, not everyone has the opportunity to.
Right.
People starve to death, right? Like the point, that's what I'm saying. Through our culture that's so focused on self-improvement, we're like, knock these goals out one at a time. But that's not what it is. It's a way of just describing what happens.
Mm-hmm.
That when a person is starving, they do not focus on belonging or what's going to happen tomorrow.
No, I was saying that's what I'm saying, that I think I do know of people in my life that may be struggling with the lower level things on the hierarchy of needs, but are focused on self-esteem, are focused.
Oh yes, that happens. Although these problems are relative, right? Like people who are focused on self-esteem are not literally on the verge of starvation. They might struggle to pay their rent, like things like that, but they're not like, nobody's worried about their self-esteem while a bear is chasing them.
Gotcha. Okay,
So
that makes sense.
there is some relative stuff in there. There's another thing at play, which is part of what I'm trying to get at, is the way that we perceive things is shaped. And so we can perceive things which are actually self-esteem things as though they are physiological things.
Okay.
And that's part of what I think causes so many problems.
Can you give me an example?
Well, so we started out by talking about like a person, the reality of a situation, is a hypothetical situation where a person's life is improving and now they're more stressed.
Yeah.
Because they're dealing with something that they weren't dealing with before. And the thing is not in a worse state than it was in before. They just weren't paying attention to it before.
Yeah.
But we've done this thing in our culture where we think that something has to be real in order for it to be important or for it to matter. So like stories don't matter and people's feelings don't matter and whatever. And then in order to make some of this stuff matter, we then have turned it culturally into like, no, this is real. And by real, I mean like exists in the universe, like it can be seen or touched or observed in some way.
Like tangible? You mean like physically touched?
Yeah, I mean like empirical,
Oh.
Meaning that other people could observe it too. Where my thoughts are not composed of matter, they don't exist. You can't point to a place in the real world, in space and time, where the thought exists. I can observe it, but that doesn't mean that it exists. It's not real. And it's all this like silly language stuff that has big ramifications, because then we end up saying like how much of the discourse at this point is around like that the way that a person feels is physiological.
Right.
The emotions and thoughts, if you think a certain kind of way, your brain is wired differently, or there's a chemical imbalance, or is the result of like trauma and your body has been changed in some way. And it's not that these things aren't necessarily true. I mean, the chemical imbalance is not, and the brain being wired differently is not, but trauma, the body does change. Your physical body does change in response to the things that happen in your life. It's that we've put this absurd standard, right? Like what happened basically was, I'm oversimplifying it, but like people being like, I feel sad. And everyone's like, that doesn't matter, shut up about it. And that in order to be like, no, it does matter, I have to be like, but being sad is just as big of a problem as having the flu. Like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Rather than changing our conceptualization to be like, no, the way that you think and the way that you feel matters, even though it is not real. We changed it as like, no, this stuff, you know, feeling stressed is the same as your life is really bad.
Right. Just because I don't know, when we started talking about the hierarchy of needs, I guess I'm going back to like, do you know of any theorists that do talk about that?
That do talk about what?
Like that the feelings and the thoughts and all of that does matter.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would say, I mean, obviously I'm speaking like casually, but I would say that all like major theoreticians of therapy, all do it that way.
Right, but I mean like to the extent of, I don't know how I'm trying to explain
It's
that.
not communicated in our culture that way.
Right.
But there are many people who do think of it that way. I mean, I think effective therapists think of it that way. I mean, even something like CBT, which is a very commonly known therapy modality, you know, theory, whatever, is based on that idea that like what you're thinking is not the same as what is real.
Right.
So even the stuff that you would think that people might generally think of as being like more evidence-based and therefore think of as being associated with the idea that this stuff is like about your biology, that stuff is still also based on the idea that what your thoughts are is not the same as what reality is, and that you're responding to your thoughts.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they're all perfect or there's no flaws or limitations, but
Yeah. No, I feel like I'm trying to get the right words out. I feel like I'm not asking it correctly. Like that makes sense, but I feel like, I don't know, I could feel like if I went to a therapist and who was practicing in CBT, for example, and being like, okay, like these thoughts need to change because that's making you have these feelings. I feel like even with doing a CBT approach, it's like, how do I say this? Like, and let's say they give you an exercise and you can't do it. Like you're trying to reframe, you're trying to do all these things and it's not working out how you want it to be. I feel like with that, then there's a lot of, well, maybe this is a whole different thing I'm going into. Then there's like a whole other thing of like the resistance. Like, okay, like, no, like this does work. You're just not doing it to the best of your ability. And that's making, I don't know, to me, when I hear that, that makes it sound like my thoughts and my feelings are not that important.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. We talk a lot about how that's a problem and we don't utilize that concept in the way that we work the idea of a client being resistant or whatever. There's a difference between like the way you asked, are there any people who think about it? And I'm talking about the people who develop the theories.
Yeah.
Not every person who is a practitioner of the theory has like fully understood and internalized the theory itself, right? So like, yeah, there are plenty of practitioners who still treat it as though your thoughts and reality are the same thing, basically, and you know should happen in a certain way. But that doesn't mean that the theory or the people who developed it or you know advance it necessarily think that same way.
Yeah.
I mean, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like therapists, we don't do anything about the physiological stuff. We don't do anything about the safety and security stuff, and that's where in our culture people might start to have some objections like, no, therapy can help you to feel more safe.
Right.
And therapy can help you to feel more safe.
Yeah.
But feeling more safe is different from being safe, right? Like if you are in a dangerous situation in your life, going to therapy, I don't change that dangerous situation. I can, and it's an important part of therapy that like, while you are with me, while you are in my space and interacting with, that you are safe here.
Right.
But I don't have any control or influence over what happens to you outside of the time that you and I are together. I have some ability, as all humans do, like when we interact, I have some ability to change the way that you think and feel and act. And if you think and feel and act differently, then you might be able to do things that change how safe you are or are not. But this is one of those important things. Feeling safe is not the same as being safe. Just like everybody knows you can think you're safe and feel totally relaxed and comfortable, and then something terrible happens and it turns out you were in danger and you just didn't know it.
Yeah.
The reverse is also true. You can think you're in grave danger, but in reality you are not. That's not to say, and this is the problem, our culture is very big on like thoughts and feelings have to be real. So when we say that, sometimes the response then is, no, I don't feel safe. That matters. And it does. That doesn't mean the same. And hopefully, most of the time, people think they are safe to the extent that they actually are. When you think you're not safe, you aren't. And when you think you are safe, you are. But we all get that wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's some of what we work on in therapy, is to get better at identifying when we are, to what extent we are safe or are in danger. Nobody wants to be panicking because they heard a bell ring and there's no actual danger, right?
Yeah.
We can talk about why that happened and how it's totally understandable and valid and even biological to some extent, that that's why it's happening. But we also are agreeing to the premise that it's not an accurate response to the situation. You're feeling much less safe than you actually are. Otherwise, why would we be here trying to get you to not be so vigilant and like, if the extent to which you are like on your guard is directly called for by the danger of the situation, then I would be doing a very unhelpful thing if I was trying to teach you how to like be able to like take a breath and calm down. Like, no, you should be on your guard because it's very dangerous.
Right.
And that's another part of the problem, is that people then think that being vigilant or being anxious or being stressed is bad and you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Instead of, no, that's useful. What we want is for it to be used in a way that seems, to the best of our ability to determine, seems to be appropriate and called for. That you're vigilant in situations in which vigilance is helpful.
Right.
Not never vigilant. That's why we call it hypervigilant, which I know words and whatever. And hyper means too much. The prefix hyper means too much. If you put hyper in front of any word, it means more than is good, more than you're supposed to have, more than is beneficial. Hyperthyroidism, you have too much thyroid hormone. Hypervigilance means you're more vigilant than you should be. It's too much vigilance.
Yeah.
Regular vigilance, not a problem. Not pleasant, but useful.
But you're saying regular vigilance is not helpful?
Is not a problem.
Oh, not a problem. Oh, my bad. Okay.
Vigilance, again, this is the nature of the language. If something is vigilance, by definition, we're saying it is not too much. That's an appropriate level of vigilance. Okay. And that's a good thing. It's an unpleasant thing, and we don't want to be in situations in which being vigilant is called for, because that means you're in a dangerous situation. And we want to like decrease that, the frequency with which that happens. But if we were to like convince a person that like, even though this is a very dangerous situation, you should be very calm and relaxed and not worry so much. Like, that we respond that way for a reason.
But then even with that though, how do I say this? Like, how do you determine whether the amount of hypervigilance is appropriate then for the situation?
Well, so what we're talking about is, how do you determine whether it is vigilance or hypervigilance? If it's too much, if it's not appropriate, it's too much, then it's hypervigilance. So there's no level of hypervigilance, which is too much. By calling it hypervigilance, we're saying it's too much. How to know? That's tricky. Yeah, it's not an exact science, and that's why this. If there was some way to identify it that way, then this wouldn't happen very much, right?
Yeah.
Like if there was some external marker that we could just point to and say definitively this is or is not how safe the situation is, then nobody would ever be more or less vigilant than they should be. So yeah, we have a bunch of comments. That first one has an autocorrect, I think. An ascetic doesn't worry about food, yet he is nearly starving. That's not exactly true, but I hear what you're saying. An ascetic is a person who abstains from worldly things. So oftentimes like barely eats and doesn't own anything and whatever. But nearly starving is doing a lot of work there, right? Like they can be eating very little, but they're eating enough to survive. That's different than not eating enough to survive. Ascendance, I think that's transcendence. Seems to be more mental, emotional versus even the basics of the physical. Well, yes, the higher up we go, the more we're talking about like emotional, cognitive, that kind of stuff. Manifest safety, meaning like if you think you're safe, you'll be safe, which is.
Oh, so if people called you hyper as a child, they were calling you too much.
Well, go ahead.
I feel that because I got called that a lot as a kid, and I want to hear what you have to say, Brandon, but my family was definitely telling me I was too much. So
yes, I think that is, I think it's a joke. I think it's also an accurate statement, but also that use of hyper is a shortening of hyperactive. If you're saying a kid is hyper, that You're
Mhm.
meaning hyperactive and sleep. So they're meaning too active. You're like moving around and being active more than is useful
Mhm.
or whatever. But like everything, it can then get used in different ways. But I mean, like, we just genuinely call people too much in and of itself sometimes, like you're too much or you're a
Yeah.
lot. When we say someone has big feelings, like that's a euphemistic thing to say now. Like that's a nice way to say it now.
Mhm.
You have big feelings. But it's not going to be long before saying someone has, I mean, it's already started to happen, that saying someone has big feelings will be just as much of an insult as saying that someone's hyperactive was a nice way to phrase it.
I mean,
instead of
honestly,
rowdy or whatever.
someone telling me I have big feelings would still make me upset. And also, randomly, something that I've been told in the past, which it doesn't sound that bad, but it just gets me to my core, and people say I'm too animated. I do not
I remember
like
you
that.
saying that.
I was so appalled that one of my friends called me that, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that," but like, I think when you add the "two" in the front, like I think if someone said, "Oh, you're animated,"
Well,
it wouldn't
anything
bother
where you
me.
say two or
Like,
hyper or
yeah.
whatever, by definition, you're saying it's more than it should be or
Right.
more than is useful or whatever. Hypo, by the way, is the opposite. It's too little. So hypoactive or hypothyroidism, you don't have enough thyroid.
Yeah. Stupid animated.
And all this stuff is just like, some of it, like thyroid hormone, like there are relatively reliable empirical ways to observe what happens. And so putting a range on like, this is the minimum and this is the maximum that's helpful. It's not like that's going to be exactly spot on for each individual person, but it's a pretty reliable and useful thing to be like, if your thyroid levels are here, we want to get them up, Whereas things like active or animated or whatever, those are much more, some of them are straight up subjective.
Yeah.
But even the ones that are still intended to be like a description of the facts of a situation are still opinion. Like you can perceive them in different ways. Is that really a friend?
It was a friend of a friend, so no.
I do say that sometimes, but usually when I'm deliberately trying not to say someone tends to overreact to everything, I'll say they have big feelings. Yeah. So I called that a euphemism because you can kind of get what I'm insinuating, but I don't want to straight up say having big reactions is necessarily bad. Yeah. And that's where this all gets really tricky. There's a reason that I know everybody thinks that I don't like the words good and bad, which is not the case. They're useful words. They're not useful in the context of what we're trying to do oftentimes. Good and bad are subjective terms. It's about, it like the word need, it describes the relationship between two things, not the thing itself. The thing itself is not bad, but it can be bad in the sense of like, if we say junk food is bad for you, what we mean is you're more likely to have poor health outcomes if you eat more of it.
Right.
And we're just summing it up as bad and good. So that's useful. It's a shorthand. But then we use it so much and people get confused and think that now it's describing something true about the thing itself.
Right.
That junk food is bad. And it's not bad, or it wouldn't exist. It has some value. It serves some function. It is bad in regards to this thing, or it's bad in that I don't like it or whatever.
I have to ask, because I know you say like, oh, people think I don't like good and bad. I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
And I get you're saying it's not used for what we're trying to do, but like, when is it? Do you ever use it? When is it useful then?
I use it all the time. It's useful in the same way that like saying, like, oh, I think that's great, is useful. Like,
yeah.
There's a book called Laziness Does Not Exist, which I have not read, but I read the essay that the author wrote first. The book was like an expansion of it and like it. And the point of that is not to say that the word lazy shouldn't exist. It's to say that lazy is a very generic term to use. So if we ever say like, why did that person not do that thing? We say because they were lazy. It's not that that's not true or whatever. That is true because that's what the word lazy means, is they didn't do something they were supposed to do.
But it ignores everything else too.
Exactly. It gets in the way of being more specific.
Right.
So that's the issue with good or bad. They're helpful to use when it doesn't matter to be specific. But they are not. Good and bad are almost as abstract and generic of terms as you can get.
Yeah.
In terms of a binary where something can be two different things.
Mhm.
It is as abstract as a binary can get. One is good, one is bad.
Right.
They contain no specific information about anything. Why is it good or bad? Why does the bad thing exist? What can we do to change the good thing, the bad thing to the good thing, whatever. Like, and so these simple generic answers get in the way of a better understanding because you
Right.
say, why did I do that? Because I was lazy. Great. What do you do about it? There's nothing to do because lazy just means you didn't do it.
Right.
But why didn't I do it? Because I was tired. Well, that's something we could potentially do something about, right?
Right.
But if I think I did it because I'm lazy, I don't try to then think like, well, but am I also tired? Like that's irrelevant.
Mhm.
I've answered the question, right? So is this thing good or bad? It just, if it's bad, and you should never do it.
Right.
Maladaptive does often get used. I really want to talk about what euphemism means, but maladaptive does often get used at this point as a euphemism for bad. We
Mhm.
still, when we're saying that, we still mean the thing is bad and it shouldn't be
Mhm.
done or whatever. But it sometimes get used still, and originally what it means is that it's something that you have done in an attempt to adapt, meaning like solve a problem,
Mhm.
but it either does not solve the problem or
Mhm.
makes the problem worse. That's what maladaptive
Mm.
means. You adapted to something, you've changed in an effort to solve a problem, but the way in which you've changed
Mhm.
did not solve the problem or makes it worse.
I just have to say, I don't know, just had a moment for a second when we're talking about like the words matter and what you say matters. Like I've been using maladaptive as bad,
Mm.
you know, and even just hearing you say the definition, it just made me feel a lot better
Yeah.
about the word in general. Look at that.
Mal is bad. That's what mal means in the roots. You know, like in French, still mal, M-A-L is bad. And then adaptive. So adaptive means changed in an effort to like accommodate for some, if we really want to get technical and jargony about it, like adaptive means an attempt to restore equilibrium to a system which has been perturbed.
Mhm.
So it's like we change to try to make something better,
Right.
adapt to the new situation. Sometimes when we change in an effort to adapt to the situation and make things better, we actually change in a way that does not make it better or makes it worse.
Okay.
So maladaptive doesn't just mean bad. Even when people use it euphemistically as bad, they still also always mean and learned.
Mm.
Maladaptive is like you learned, you at some point you started doing this thing
Yeah.
and it's bad. So it still contains that adaptive like changed, you know. But yeah, and the thing is like identifying maladaptive, all of this stuff is tricky because the thing you're doing now does help sometimes
Mhm.
with things like that. This particular version or this subset of things like that, when you use it there, it doesn't work.
Right.
That's generalization stuff, right? Like if you feel bad, go to the doctor and get, you know, have them take a look and give you some medicine or whatever. It's adaptive, except sometimes you feel bad and you go to the doctor and like in that kind of feeling bad, it doesn't work for.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it's always a bad thing.
Mhm.
We generalize lessons. Even trauma is the same thing. I thought I was safe, bad thing happened.
Mhm.
Afterwards, I changed. Now I know that there were some things that were present in that scenario that I did not read as a sign of danger.
Mhm.
And if I now respond to those things as though they're a sign of danger, I will be able to prevent that from happening again.
Right.
It's not always true, and we overdo it. Like the fact that the walls in that room were red is probably not relevant to why it was dangerous, but I am now
Mhm.
like maybe that was the cue that I missed.
Right.
It still makes sense why we make that change.
I don't know. Now I'm thinking my wheels are turning about the maladaptive things. I know I just said like a minute ago that it's helpful to have the actual definition, but now I catch myself being angry at that word altogether because it's like if I do something that's maladaptive, so it wasn't helpful for that situation, I'm still going to generalize it to all situations.
Yes.
And not just the specific one.
Well, I mean, not all situations, but if we want to get real technical and specific, every moment is different from every other moment, right?
Yeah.
And that's just not a useful way. Like we are literally not capable of navigating the world as though everything is new. Like you are a different person every moment. How are you supposed to like actually conceptualize that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we do as thinking humans, we create what are called perceptual sets. We create schema. We categorize things,
Mhm.
and that's really useful. And sometimes categories, let's say plants are edible. It's not an untrue statement, but not all plants are edible.
Right.
And so if you eat some carrots or, whatever, and you're like, oh, things that grow in the ground are edible, and then you go and you eat something else that grows in the ground, it might work. But there are some things that grow in the ground that if you eat, it's going to mess you up real good. Maybe even kill you.
Yeah.
So then we have to get more specific. It's like, oh, it's not just anything that grows in the ground is edible. It's like some things are and some aren't. In other words, yes, no, we have to generalize things. We cannot ever in advance make sure that we have gotten exactly the right level of categorization and specificity with everything. We're going to mess up. We make mistakes constantly.
Yeah.
All day, every day, you are getting things wrong. I am getting things wrong. This is what we talk about. So the nature of being human is going through a life in which you are wrong about everything and learning how to do that in a way that is helpful and pleasant and whatever anyway. Not to try and never be wrong. That's not possible. Easy, chocolate good, kale bad. Yes, in that case, tasting is what you tastes good and kale tastes bad, and that obviously in this case is very opinion based. Some people would disagree, and I know it's a joke. I use maladaptive to mean like I recognize that this response is useful in some contexts, but not in this particular context. Sure. So I need to adjust somehow to the context. Well, as my internet friends would say, all plants are edible once. That's funny. I like that.
I also like what you said about like your definition of maladaptive.
Yeah, that is a common way. No, I won't say common, but like that's partly how you're talking about it too. And that's a useful way to use the word. But so euphemism. I've used that word a few times today. Euphemism is when you take something that like the concept of the thing has a problem in some way, and you attach a new word to it or a new phrase to it.
Okay.
So you don't change the underlying concept itself, you just change the language you attach to it. So like imagine that like, I don't know, the bathroom in my house has fallen and it's like a pit into the ground or whatever. If I just close that door, that problem still exists.
Right.
And so if people ask for the bathroom and I'm like, oh, that's the bathroom, go use that or whatever. Then they walk in and they fall in the pit and it's like, ooh, this is not good. I should do something about that. Let me start calling it the water closet. Because whenever I tell people to use the bathroom, they fall into a pit. So I'll call this the water closet and that way it won't happen. But then over time, like they're still going to go in the door and fall in the pit.
Right.
So euphemism, EU, the prefix EU is Greek for good. So euphemism is just like the good way to say something. That's a maladaptive toilet. So there's something called euphemistic drift, which is when the core concept is a problem, we assign a new term. Like eventually the word that's associated with that problem is identified as like, that's a bad, we shouldn't say that, that's rude or whatever. So we put a new term to connect it to. But the problem is still there. But this is now the identified, like this is the correct way, the euphemistic, the nicer way to say it. But over time, this thing is also going to be thought of as being rude and problematic because it still points at the same core problem.
Right.
Literally like, so very famous example of this. Idiot is a word that originally was relatively clinical, right? Like that a person was an idiot was like a mental condition. It's, was used in the same way that at this point we would call like intellectually disabled or developmentally delayed, different versions of it. But like the concept of what we mean by that is not great. Everybody thinks it's a real thing, and to some extent it does match to real things, and so we still use it. But of course then like when you're mad, somebody sometime is going to be like, you're an idiot. Yeah. And you think as in ways that are as difficult or unuseful as this person who operates in this way that you and I both agree has trouble with how they think about things. So then that just becomes an insult. And then it's like, well, the people who have the clinical term of idiot, like we don't mean that as an insult. So let's not call them this insulting thing anymore. But the reason it became an insult was because of what we called them.
Right.
So then, like, one of the euphemistic things was to call a person like that mentally retarded. That was the nice way to say it. They're not an idiot, they're mentally retarded. Then that becomes terrible. And then we say that they're differently abled. And like, that's already something that gets used as an insult now. Or they're special, which is a nice thing when you first say it, but that gets used as an insulting thing now.
So then is there any way to get out of that loop then? I feel like if you're saying that no matter what over time, there's going to be something that's
only to change the core problem of the idea. That's, you can't just, you can put a new coat of paint on it, but it's still like, we could say, for example, that even racists are like much less, even like virulently racist people are much less likely to use the N-word than they used to be, especially in public or mixed company or whatever.
Yeah.
But they can still think the same things and say the same things and cause the same problems while using the word black.
Right. Yeah.
Or African American or urban or whatever. You know, like changing the word doesn't change the problem. Although it is useful in many cases because it's like, it's a way to signal, like this is called, people refer to this thing called virtue signaling, which is not what I'm,
What is that, virtue signaling?
Virtue signaling. I realized as soon as I use the word signal that it's like quite likely that someone would think I'm talking about virtue signaling, which is kind of what I'm talking about, but not the version that everybody knows on the internet. It can be useful as a way to like identify to people what your beliefs are, right? Like if you say neurodivergent instead of autistic, that signals to other people who also might think, you know, neurodivergent is the term I use. I don't, whatever, like it's a way of signaling to people that you share certain beliefs with them or whatever. Virtue signaling is generally talked about online as a way to falsely give an idea, an impression, like, look how virtuous I am. I'm going out of my way so that you won't think that I'm virtuous. But all language and all communication is signaling. We're showing things, demonstrating things to other people. Oh, hold on. There's some comments. Man, linguistics is so cool. Linguistics is cool. I think if I could have been confident that I could make a living off it when I was younger, there's like a 40% chance I would have gone into linguistics. When you have 900 interests, it's easy to not choose the ones that are unlikely to pay. Opposite of virtue signaling, villain signaling, red flag waving, defect signaling. Yeah, this is another fun linguistic thing, is that a red flag is not a problem. A red flag is a warning of a potential problem ahead.
Yeah.
But now we talk about red flags like that is in and of itself a problem.
Right. How does it get to that point just over time with people using language differently that it just sticks to that way then?
Yes, it's somewhat about how language is used. That's where like the linguistic drift part of it comes in. But for the specifics of how something happens, it's about the concept of that thing. That's why the language drifted there. You know, like love bombing, let's use as an example. So it is true that in the most common patterns of abuse that we see in like romantic relationships that are abusive or turn abusive, it is true that there is a very common pattern where the abusive person will do something abusive, you know, hurt somebody, whatever, and then afterwards will profusely apologize and try to make up for it.
Yeah.
And so when we're observing that pattern, it's useful then to be able to talk about that, right? Because what the point of that, and this is maybe a really hot take, but I would not say that, I'll do a less hot take version of it. It is definitely not universally true that every single person who is engaged in that pattern of abuse is maliciously and deceptively apologizing. There are at least some instances in which a person does something awful, which I agree is awful, and it's not to be tolerated and all that stuff. And then also genuinely feels really terrible about it and wants to make up for it.
Yeah.
Right? Well, what the problem becomes is if a person does something like that and then they make up for it, but then they do it again, and then they try to make up for it and they do it again. And at some point we're trying to say, like, is this going to keep happening?
Yeah.
Was this a one-time thing, you know, like dire circumstances, whatever? And to be clear, some of the things that fall into this category, I would generally argue one time is already too much. but certainly some versions of abuse, verbal abuse, everybody at some point has said mean things to their partner,
Right.
even things deliberately trying to hurt them. So it's not doing it one time that makes it an abusive relationship. And so people are trying to identify, like, is this like going to keep happening or not? It doesn't matter if they're faking the apology and doing it as a conscious, deceptive attempt to manipulate me into staying, or if they genuinely mean it. Either way, I'm still trying to figure out, is this likely to keep happening?
Right.
And so when we're talking about these things and studying these things and teaching people about these things, it's useful to have language for that piece where it's like, no, someone is like being very apologetic and is showering you with gifts and praise and telling you how much they love you, whatever. And so we call that love bombing. But it's in the specific context of a person being abusive.
Right.
Unfortunately, then we teach people about that because it's useful to know, like, hey, just because someone does all this doesn't mean they're not abusive. Sometimes that is, in fact, commonly that's part of a pattern of abuse.
Okay.
And then we spread the concept, and it's difficult to spread concepts in very nuanced and complex ways. And so eventually then it becomes like, oh, if a person showers you with too much love and attention and gifts and apologizes too profusely, they're abusive.
Right. Yeah.
Which is not the same thing. Abusive people do that. Not all people who do that are abusive or are abusing you when they do that.
Yeah.
So that's an example of the kind of thing that's like a red flag that we then. And again, that one's tricky because, like, what's too much, like too profusely professing my love for you? Like, that's different for different people.
Right.
So if you're doing it more than I'm comfortable with, again, that matters. I don't like it. And that's valid, and we can talk about it, and maybe it means we're not a good fit, or maybe we can communicate and find a way to like compromise and work it out. But it doesn't mean that it is in some definitive way too much.
Right.
Somebody else might like that level. Obviously, at least in theory, the person themselves doing it likes that level. We all talk about the 5 love languages, and we express love differently. This is one of those things. If one person who's real big into like stating words of affirmation, I love you, you're so amazing, and one person who like that's meaningless to, that can get interpreted then as love bombing.
Right.
Wow. The fact that let me try and think of like some things that are thought of. So when we use the term red flags, generally we're using that in our culture as talking about things in heterosexual relationships that women can observe in men as a red flag. It's not exclusively that, but it gets used in that direction more. So the examples that pop to mind are more in that direction, but like, here are some things that people will sometimes talk about as red flags, like he's really close with his mom.
Yeah.
That's a red flag. Men do use that particular one against women too. She's really close with her mom.
Really?
Yeah, not as much.
Oh.
Well, I guess I can't say in personal experience, but like anecdotally, or like from what it gets discussed. What men were more likely to call a red flag in a woman is like
needy.
I'm going to like stereotypical things because we're talking about like common stereotypical.
Well, I was gonna say like someone who's like needy, like
requires
like, so much attention.
She expects me to pay for everything. That's a red flag, but like one that gets applied in both directions is like they're unemployed. That's a red flag. They've never held a job for longer than whatever, or they've never been in a relationship for longer than a month. That's a red flag. And it's the point of a red flag is like that is something that could be warning you of a potential problem that exists. It doesn't mean that it is a problem.
Right. Yeah.
There are people who do any of those things that like would be a wonderful fit for the person who might otherwise be like, oh no, it's terrible.
Oh, I hate all the red flag talk. It kills me.
Oh, wait, hold on. Just some comments again. I mean, it's very useful to me if a date starts using racist terms because then I can GTFO, but it's also detrimental to society. But definitely, I think often they're basically sincere and feeling bad doesn't mean they'll change. And people used to think it was sweet to have the guy you were cheating on your husband with show up at your house where you're spending time with your family using a boombox to cover up what he's doing and apologizing to you with poster board. Yeah, 2 different very famous movies being referenced there. Both of which, well, the boombox gets used as an example of love bombing. That's from Say Anything. Although in that particular movie, there isn't like a cheating or an inappropriateness. It is like a, people break up and then
Yeah.
apologize and try to get back together. It's maybe a bit showy, and it's problematic in the sense that like if a person doesn't want that,
Right.
then it becomes a problem. But obviously it's a movie.
Right.
She liked it, so nobody's saying like that's a big problem. It's
Right.
sweet. You know, there was there was a story about a guy who's a pianist, a musician, I don't know, 5-10 years ago in the UK, who he and his girlfriend broke up, and then he went and played piano in the
Mhm.
park every day for like, and he was like, I'm gonna play piano in this park until she loves me again or whatever. And people pointed out a bunch about like, well, you're like putting a lot of pressure on this woman to like whatever. Again, though, had she come down that day or the next day and been like, no, this is very sweet and I'm sorry,
Right.
and like we'd all be like, oh, cool.
Mhm.
The poster board one, I agree, that's from Love Actually.
Yep, I know.
That one's ridiculous.
I will say I do know people that I think would very much swoon over a boombox being held out the window.
Right, that's the kind of thing.
Right.
It's like you know, leaving a love note and a rose on your car or whatever. Like, depending on who we are, the context
Right.
or whatever, like that could be very sweet, or it could be like, how the hell did this guy find me? You know,
Yeah.
like that's creepy. You know, again, that doesn't mean that the guy is a bad guy or is a stalker, but it's understandable to be like, well, finding out where I am and like following me could be a sign that this is a guy who like doesn't respect boundaries and whatever. But yeah, the poster board, that one, I hate that one.
It was
Because that's just him making his problem her problem.
Yeah.
In order for me to be able to get over my difficult emotional experience, I have to tell you about it. Oh yes, he did also play music. I forgot because he was pretending that they were "Say It's Carolers" was one of the posters.
It's such a long. I need to rewatch that movie.
It's there are many movies like this where like I enjoyed it. In fact, I quite liked it when I first watched it, and only later did I like reflect more on it and be like, oh. I'll say the poster board thing bothered me when I saw it. Like,
It bothered me when you said,
that
yeah.
one was that, and like the British guys going to America and all that stuff that happened. But the movie as a whole, I liked, and it wasn't until later that heard things that people were saying and thought more about it. I was like, and I'll say, and we need to wrap up, but I'll say that I am not one of the people who believes that like in order for a product or a piece of art to be useful or beneficial to a person, it must be like flawless. There are plenty of like, and it is interesting which ones get kind of like culturally identified as like this one is a problem and this one is okay. But like, there's like a bunch of really problematic stuff in The Godfather, but we still talk about that as a great movie. So it has something to do with like the demographics it's aimed at. The ones that were aimed at men tend to be like, well, yeah, of course it's terrible. Where Love Actually is a rom-com, and so that one, like, well, this is not great about women.
Yeah.
Matters more.
I have to rewatch all of these now. Homework.
Anyway, that's what euphemism means, is when you're using a different term. Oftentimes in our culture, this is called politically correct. The politically correct term is you're still talking about the same thing, but you're using the new term that has been identified. So like high functioning, low functioning, autistic is obviously problematic. And then we replace it with high support needs, low support needs. And like the problem is not in the word that was used. The problem is in the conceptualization. So calling it high support needs, low support needs does not solve the problem. It's still just as much of a problem.
There are better rom-coms for
There are
sure.
better rom-coms. Yeah. Never been a huge rom-com guy. I don't
Not for
avoid
me too
them,
much.
but like it's not like K-dramas are being pumped up by the day. All right, we got to wrap up. It's good to be with you all.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Good to be with you.
Oh, you too. Like, who are you talking to?
Oh, I was talking to them first.
Oh, thank you. Nice being
We'll be
here.
here same time next week.